Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about Pioneer Mono Red and all the different builds that you can play with this deck and the flex slots in the deck and how to pick what flex slots you play in the slots that you can to make the different builds. Let's just jump into it. So this is Pioneer Mono Red, but more specifically, this is Pioneer Mono Red, like the non-flex locks, the cards you're pretty much bought into playing. It's these 53 cards in the main deck and these 7 cards in the sideboard. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about what do you play in the 7 slots that are missing in the main deck and the 8 slots that are missing in the sideboard. Well, these are your options. In order to make your very own build of Mono Red Aggro in Pioneer, you're going to be selecting 7 of these 29 cards in the main deck and 8 of these 21 cards in the sideboard. So let's talk about them. First off, you're going to be selecting between 1 and 3 lands. These Mono Red decks have been going up to 23 lands. There's only 20 that are like you absolutely have to play. You can play 1 Den of the Bugbear. Den of the Bugbear is a land where if you control 2 or more lands, Den of the Bugbear enters tapped, and it taps for a red. So if you play it in the early turns, Den of the Bugbear is totally fine in our deck. But we can play 4 mana until end of turn. Den of the Bugbear becomes a 3/2 red goblin creature. Whenever this creature attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. It's still a land. Just having a man land that taps for red is really powerful, and having man lands that can kind of get there after our opponent stabilizes is super powerful as well. You can play up to 2 more mountains. Mountains enter on tap. It's the color of our deck. It's pretty good. You can play Mutavault 3 and 4. Mutavault's really awesome because it's a manland that we can activate for very, very cheap, be able to attack with the rest of our creatures. Enters untap always. The downside, it is colorless, not red. So sometimes we can be stuck with mulligans or some weird mana if we play too many Mutavaults. You can play the second Reminap Ruins. Reminap Ruins is a land that always enters untapped, which is nice. You can tap it to add a colorless, or you can tap it and pay 1 life to add a red. So it's a little painful to play. However, we can pay 4 mana and tap it and sacrifice it to have Reminap Ruins deal 2 damage to each opponent. There's just a little bit extra that we can play at the end to get that little last bit of damage in. And we could play the 4th Rockface Village. Entering untapped, you can tap it to add a colorless mana, or you can tap it to add a red mana, but you can only cast creature spells with that red mana. And you can pay 1 red and tap it to have target lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. So there's a pretty significant downside with this card. We are playing mostly creatures, so often it isn't a downside. And the reason we play Rockface Village, yes, to give stuff haste and pump it up, and that's pretty cool. But the reason we're playing Rockface Village really is to trigger Valiant for just Rockface Village and 1 more land. And we can trigger that every single turn on cards like Heartfire Hero and Emberheart Challenger, which is very, very powerful. It's why 3 of them is stock, like you have to play it, but you totally play the 4th. So again, we're going to be selecting up to 3 more lands, which leaves 4 more cards for the rest of the deck. You can play up to 3 Grease Wrench Goblin. Grease Wrench Goblin is a 1 mana 2/1 with Exhaust for 3 mana, where you discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This is a pretty aggressively costed creature and pretty good if you expect to go long with decks. Pretty bad if you're not going to be going long with those decks. You can play up to 2 Hired Claw. Hired Claw is a 1 red 1/2. Whenever you attack with 1 or more lizards, Hired Claw deals 1 damage to target opponent. And you can pay 2 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on Hired Claw. Activate only if an opponent lost life this turn and only once each turn. So this is effectively another 2 power 1-drop because it deals a damage when it attacks and it's 1 power itself. That's a pretty good mana dump as time goes on, which is really, really nice. Also, the turn you play it, if you play it in the mid game, you can play it and then attack with the Mutavault and you get the Hired Claw trigger, which is really cute, actually. You can play up to 2 Kellen. Planar Trailblazer. It is a 1 mana 2/1. You can pay 2 mana if Kellen is a scout, which is what it starts as. Becomes a human fairy detective and gains whenever Kellen deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. And you pay 3 mana, say if Kellen is a detective, it becomes a 3/2 human fairy rogue and gains double strike. So it's kind of like a level up card. It's just aggressively costed. Another thing we can dump mana into, like we like with Hired Claw, and really good against decks that don't have a lot of blockers, and we can just get some crazy card advantage off of it. You can fill all of the slots with Monastery Swiftspear. It's a 1-mana 1/2 with haste and prowess. It's just very, very, very powerful. We play plenty of non-creature spells to trigger the prowess. So good. It's played in this deck in Modern. We love it. You play up to 3 Reckless Rage. It's a 1-mana instant, deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control, and 2 damage to target creature you control. This is really solid because it's a 1-mana way to get rid of things with toughness 4 or greater, which is pretty hard to do. Also, a lot of our stuff has like either prowess or higher than 3 toughness, so dealing damage to our own thing doesn't really matter. It's also really cute alongside like Screaming Nemesis. So it's all around a super powerful thing. If we take a note out of Heroic's book, you can play up to 3 Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike is a 2-mana instant, deals 3 damage to any target. Just a great burn spell to finish things off and get things out of the way. You can play up to a playset of Bonecrusher Giant, so Bonecrusher Giant 2 through 4. It is a 3-mana 4/3. When Bonecrusher Giant becomes a target of spell, Bonecrusher Giant deals 2 damage to that spell's controller, and its adventure is Stomp, which is a 2-mana instant. Damage can't be prevented this turn, and deals 2 damage to any target. So this is a removal spell. Damage not being prevented is pretty nice as well because it can get around some protection. But removal spell that is also a creature, allows us to go really long, kill small things, apply pressure. Bonecrusher Giant is just awesome. And we can play up to 2 Witchstalker Frenzy in the main deck. Witchstalker Frenzy is a 4-mana instant that deals 5 damage to target creature. However, it costs 1 less to cast for each creature that attacked this turn. This is a great way to get big things out of the way, like Shieldrids or whatever, while we're attacking with all of our creatures. So you're going to be selecting, again, 7 of these 29 cards to add to the main deck. But let's look at the sideboard. Sideboard, we're looking for 8 cards? Yeah, 8 cards. You could play the 4th Redcap Melee. Redcap Melee is a 1-mana instant, deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If a non-red permanent is dealt damage this way, you sacrifice a land. So obviously, the best removal spell you could ever imagine against the other red decks, which is very powerful in this format. Also totally fine if we really, really need to get creatures out of the way against other super intense creature-based decks, but mostly is for a red deck. We can play up to 2 Rending Volley. It's a 1-mana instant. The spell can't be countered. Rending Volley deals 4 damage to target white or blue creature. Very good against the Greasefang decks, the Dimir aggro deck, things like that. Torch the Tower 3 and 4. Torch the Tower is a 1-mana instant with Bargain. It deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If spell is Bargain, instead it deals 3 damage to that permanent and you scry 1. If a permanent dealt damage at Torch the Tower would die, exile it instead. Very, very good in the mirror match or really anything with small creatures that we got to deal with. Also love it against Phoenix, because, getting rid of the Phoenixes forever is a great way to beat, their nut hands, make it so Heartfire Hero doesn't trigger, all that stuff. You can play up to 3 Magebane Lizard. Magebane Lizard is a 2-mana 1/4. Whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, Magebane Lizard deals damage to that player equal to the number of non-creature spell they've cast this turn. Very good against decks that are casting a lot of non-creature spells. Like, obviously great against Phoenix, but also, like, totally fine against Blue-White Control, all that stuff. You play Unchained Berserker. Unchained Berserker is a 2-mana 1/1 with protection from white. It gets +2/+0 as long as it is attacking. Being pro-white's a pretty big deal. It's decent against Enigmatic Incarnation because it gets around like Leyline Binding. Also, it gets around most of Azorius Control's removal, which is just like another way to deal a bunch of damage. We've already talked about Bonecrusher Giant, but you could run 2 of them in the sideboard. You can play up to 4 Urbrass Forge, which is a 3-mana artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put an oil counter on Urbrass Forge. Then create an X1 red Phyrexian horror creature token with trample and haste, where X is the number of oil counters on Urbrass Forge. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step. This you would play against decks that are very, very good at answering what we're doing. So like Blue-White Control immediately pops into my head. Decks that are looking to go super, super long with us, aren't applying a lot of pressure, and if we can get an Urbrass Forge down, the game is just over. You can play up to 3 Chandra Dress to Kill. It's a 3-mana planeswalker. Its +1 is add a red. Deals 1 damage to up to 1 target player or planeswalker. You can the other +1 is exile a top card of your library. If it's red, you may cast it this turn. And its -7 is exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may cast red spells from among them this turn. You and an emblem with whenever you cast a red spell, this emblem deals X damage to any target, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast the spell. This is fulfilling a really similar role as Urbrass Forge. Instead of it being a threat in and of itself, Chandra Dress to Kill gets to live as a threat that must be answered against these decks that want to go really, really long by essentially drawing a ton of cards off the top of our deck, being able to play all those cards out of exile in the top of our deck. We could play up to one Witchstalker Frenzy in the sideboard. We already talked about that. And you play up to 2 Grafdigger's Cage. It's a 1-mana artifact. Creature cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield, and players can't cast spells from graveyards or library. It's just decent graveyard hate that we can just like play it for 1 mana and then forget about it, which is awesome. So you're going to be selecting 8 of these 21 cards for the sideboard. You're going to be selecting 7 of these 29 cards for the main deck. And once you do, you have your very own but stock version of Mono Red Aggro in Pioneer. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.